So you had the idea to start this off on the alien topic and people's misrepresentation or interpretation of what aliens are or could be. So would you want to give a little bit about that and let us know how people are looking at it potentially wrong?
Yeah, maybe not looking at it wrong, but just looking at it through a very narrow lens.
Hmm.
Um, but the first thing that's kind of getting to me right now, I mean, you're actually in the area. So you're kind of in that
Somewhat.
zone,
Yeah.
yeah, where all
Well,
these
I've
things
been
are
looking
being,
up. I haven't seen anything yet.
yeah. And and so if that changes, let me know. But
Hmm.
first off, like a lot of these videos of UAP in like New Jersey, whatever, are literally just airplanes flying overhead.
I think so too.
and
Yeah.
and you can tell there's a few tells. One of them is that like the sound will be off, so you can't hear like the jet engine. Does a
Yeah.
and it's like okay, and typically the answer will always be like halfway down the comments of that thread or video or whatever. And the problem is that so many people don't actually do the due diligence to go a little bit deeper. They
Hmm.
don't, they'll read the title, or some people actually watch like half the clip or maybe the full clip, but very few people will go all the way down. And so they just immediately think that it is something. And there's people out there saying these drones are disguising themselves as planes. And just at the end of the day, a lot of these videos are just of actual commercial airliners. Or there's one video that I saw from it was actually from 7 years ago of a Blackbird bomber flying overhead. So it has that weird, like, V shape.
Hmm.
And they turned the sound off on that. And then they repurposed that video and said, hey, this is a drone in New Jersey right now. But someone's like, actually, that video was posted 7 years ago. So there's a whole bunch of stupid stuff happening right now as it relates to that. People just like capitalizing on the wave of interest
Hmm.
and using it to grow their Twitter accounts, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, that said, I mean, I saw my own first like UFO at the very beginning of this year, and it was crazy. And I've met a lot of people who've seen them, and there's a recurring trend also with people who use psychedelics seeing weird things. And it's like opening up their sensory perception.
That's it.
And I just have this, it's like, I think that humanity right now wants this greater experience of reality and to connect to the possibility of what is, because we know that life is out there and some of it's intelligent, more intelligent than us, undoubtedly. I think there's just like a human desire to finally reach that stage. And so we have this like UAP thing in New Jersey where people are like taking what we do have, which is commercial jets, and turning it into something almost in the hope of like manifesting something. Meanwhile, like these things are here, but you have to open up like your sensory floodgates to see them because I don't think they're really of this dimension.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, they're interdimensional, not necessarily interplanetary or intergalactic, maybe. But I think if there are aliens and other life forms, they are here and they're not here, and it's all through dimensions. It's all through just different densities, you could say. And that's how I see
Hmm.
the alien phenomenon. And what's happening in New Jersey, man, I think it's just a bunch of different storylines that are intermingling, and yet people are trying to get clout from it, and they're just posting airliners. And yeah, I really don't think it's aliens. I wish it was, but I don't think it is. I think it's just people misrepresenting what they're seeing as aliens. And then yeah, then people just kind of get lost in echo chambers of that, and they fall into the emotional like pull of it being aliens, and then it's just kind of like a snowball effect, alien snowball effect of emotions. But really, I mean, what do you think's happening in New Jersey? Do you think it is some sort of craft? Do you think it's like a government program, or yeah, what is your inclination or your intuition tell you?
I mean, I can just go off of like two of my own personal experiences. The first one is very simple. It's nothing actually bizarre. But I had just graduated high school and I was going to junior college, and I had like an archery range out kind of like off the highway in Napa where I grew up. And it was just like along the side of the road. and there actually was a bow hunting company there. So they were the guys that were shooting their bows, and I joined them. And it was right next to the Napa airport. And I was like in the flow with just shooting my bow. And I guess I was like in this like kind of primal like state of mind, you could say.
Mm.
And one of these small like private jets flew over and it was like really close and it did like this turn in this bank and I didn't know what the sound was at first. And I looked up and it was like it was really freaking crazy. I mean, I obviously knew it was a jet, but that part of my brain which identified it was clicked off for like a good 2 seconds. And it was just my eyes were open. I wasn't thinking anything. I was just experiencing this crazy like machine flying over me.
Yeah.
And so it engaged this like primal sense and this awe and like what the heck is like I was in that 2 second period of time a Paleolithic man shooting his bow and arrow and it's like
Yeah.
what the heck is this? And I think that is alive in all of us to some degree.
Yeah. The caveman.
Yeah, and beyond the like Paleolithic mindset angle, which I think is something that's at play here, because this is this ancient ancestral like experience and DNAs within all of us. There's also just we want this greater connection to cosmos and source and consciousness and everything. And I think we're almost trying to manifest, like, for example, aliens into our existence, because if they are more intelligent and higher vibrational and of higher dimensions, and this represents like a way for us to leap forward and expand beyond the mundane and our 3D reality. This is all supported by the astrology right now too. I think maybe there have been some legit sightings of weird things in recent weeks, but I think there's also still this block of people being very much like locked into the material and not and just seeing a very small perspective of what it may be. And what we're going to talk about is also just going to be a small perspective of reality too. But I think the whole alien thing is multidimensional. And like for example, when you have a piece of paper, it's a 2D plane. A lot of people know this. Like the ant can move all the way across the paper and it'll take a long time. But if you just fold that paper, all of a sudden now you have your wormhole and the ant can go from one to another. So you warp
Exactly.
that plane of um, space and time. But this is not 3 dimensions; it's only two. This is flatland. The same can be done for 3D, like our reality. And so they don't even have to like travel across interstellar space or like across galaxies with like conventional measures and like the speed of light if they are of like a different dimensional just lineage, you could say,
Yeah.
or that's just what they are.
Hmm.
And so they could manifest or just show up in our reality and then just as quickly be somewhere else completely in the
Hmm.
universe or maybe
Yeah.
multiverse. I think that's what's at play.
I think so too, man. And, we're not physicists, so it's hard for us to really wrap our head around it at a deeper level. But I don't know. There's something in my mind, in my intuition, that says that's how it is. Because in the example that you just provided, it's pretty simple to see that we have the ability to, as a 3D being, to morph sort of the 2D realm, right? We can traverse the 2D realm, but we have the audacity to think we end at the 3D realm. The three dimensions is like the pinnacle, and that's the furthest we're going to go with travels, with propulsion and things of that crude nature. But I think if you can expand your horizons and your perception just a little bit to entertain the possibility that there are different ways to traverse the universe, it will allow you to accept the idea of aliens or interdimensional beings a lot easier. You might not be able to explain it, like I said, but at least you can accept the possibility. And I think that's what we're at right now. And for our entire civilization, we're slowly accepting the possibility that there are means of teleportation, essentially, different means of seeing yourself, seeing other beings, just different means or a different place in the cosmos. And that place might not be localized. It may be non-linear and non-local. And if there are higher intelligences, which I do believe, they are non-linear and non-local. And they're here. They're here and there. That's the thing. It's probably simultaneous. It's probably like this thing where
Mm,
we're just seeing like the shadow of the 5D in some way. Like when we
mm,
see craft, maybe it's not even the craft. Maybe it's like their I don't know, dude. I'm not even gonna try and explain it, but it's like the shadow of what they really are wherever they really are. You know, like when you cast a shadow in the 3D into the 2D, you're just seeing a very rudimentary shape of the human form as the shadow or as like a cup. I'm looking at a cup right now, the shadow of the cup. It's not actually the cup, but it is some portion of it. So the 2D beings would be like, look at that. Look at that spaceship, the 2D spaceship. And they're looking at the shadow and they have no idea what it is. So I think in some way, that's what's being done is the 5D or 4D beings are casting their shadow into our realm. And we're just getting quick glimpses of it. That's the thing, is we're just like, we're seeing it really, really quick because it's not the full representation of what these beings are. Not that our mind probably could ever conceive of it. I don't think they could because we have a 3D mind essentially, but at least I'm open to the possibility of entertaining that there's something greater and much more intelligent than myself. And point of my story, I think that's where we're at right now. We're slowly introducing that into the zeitgeist.
yeah, exactly. The shadow is an interesting thing to bring up too because it captures 2D information, and it's very low resolution. Like you get a bit of the shape and form, that's it. Like your shadow, for example. But then if I was actually look at you, I can see your facial features, I can see your pores, your hair follicle. Like, we can go super in depth and look at everything under a microscope. Even a shadow only gets like your shape and form. Um, and I find it interesting that when people, like this is often reported, when people take mushrooms, they take like high dose mushrooms, that's when they will actually start to see some of these like craft appear. And mushrooms change your brainwave structure, your frequency resonance and everything. And I think it very much opens up your sensory perception. You and I both have experience. Uh, and so I've seen some crazy things on mushrooms. I haven't seen crafts before, but I was out in the forest and like the trees like form like this force field. I think I was actually seeing like the magnetic force field that the trees emit. The conductive flow of ionic water through their structures, their vascular system. Anything that flows that has a charge creates a magnetic field. And so trees emit these very subtle magnetic fields all around them. If you have a forest, you have a whole massive network of this, creating this big like tree biofield auric network, you could say. I think I was actually seeing that with the mushrooms. I think I was able to somehow, my brain was able to take that information and process it. Because everything we're seeing is just also raw input that our brain decides to process and bring into our awareness and consciousness. And something that's interesting I was thinking about when you were speaking is about how there's like these images and pictures that the ancient Indians, like from India, that they like created thousands of years ago, showing like these flying craft. And if mushrooms if mushrooms are a common thing that people will ingest and then see these craft or UFOs, whatever, with, we know that you can reach the same brainwave states and the same altered levels of consciousness with very extreme levels of training, but completely sober with breath work and meditation, etc. You've talked to a lot of these people on your channel. And so perhaps it wasn't necessarily like a lot of these ancient archaeologists and ancient alien people, right? Maybe it wasn't necessarily that the aliens came and announced themselves to everybody, like, hey, all of India, we're here, right? But it was just certain, like, Himalayan monks, perhaps, saw these because they were in such transcendental states of consciousness. Then they recorded them, and that entered into overall the cultural repertoire, like the repository. But it wasn't something seen by everyone because again, it is consciousness based, it's vibration based. What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, your point was that it's just but raising your consciousness level, whether it's through the means of, somatic practices of meditation or maybe through the forbidden fruit, the sacrament of mushrooms or whatever else there is that was provided to us on the planet. All that really matters is being able to raise your awareness out of this density, and then you'll be able to see these things that are traveling themselves or transporting themselves in and through this density, right? That was your point?
Yeah, in general. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. And then you mentioned the Vimanas.
You would know better than me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's mentioned a little bit. The Vimanas that are in the Mahabharata. I don't ever know how to pronounce that, but it's also in the visions of Ezekiel. And I think there's many other texts too that have these visions of higher beings. And a lot of them mention them in the way of angels, right? Angels or demons, the seraphim or the Nephilim or the Vimanas, as I said. But I think, honestly, man, I think you can come to find from raising your own consciousness that the spirit realm and the alien realm are one. Some people are spiritualists, some people are alien people, but I think a truly integrated individual on this path is able to see that it's all one. It's all one spectrum, you could say. And it seems to be not only a spectrum, but a hierarchy of intelligence, right? Like these
Mm.
beings seem to be of just higher intelligence, higher consciousness levels. And you can start to feel that yourself in your own life. Like when you start to um, engage your own consciousness, your own nervous system, and raise it, you feel elevated, right? There is this like sort of elevated state. And it feels as though you're raising yourself above the densities of the 3D. I mean, that's the popular buzzword. You're going to 4D or 5D consciousness, but it actually does feel like that. Like you're raising yourself out of the just old paradigm that we've been living under, the caveman the Paleolithic mind, right?
Yeah.
You're evolving towards some kind of higher just way of seeing, way of being. And I think these beings are way, way further ahead of us in that regard, right? But point of my story is that you can just feel it yourself. If you go within yourself, you'll be able to feel it with mushrooms or without mushrooms. You can feel that there's something going on with intelligence. We're not at the end of evolution per se. We're still evolving ourselves. But we have the audacity to believe that evolution has stopped and this is the end. And we have Google, we got Wikipedia, we got Chat GPT, and that's it, man. We're done. No, we're still evolving. But the difference is now, I feel, we're not at the whim of our environment anymore. Like evolution is not tied to the classical Darwinian explanation. Now, our place is to evolve ourselves, conscious evolution to become like these beings. And it's your choice. That's the thing. It's your choice if you really want to. And if you want to, you will be able to understand a little bit more the context of spirits and aliens and these different realms and these different densities. You might not be able to explain it fully, but at least you can kind of understand and explore the possibility of these other beings. And yeah, man. Yeah.
I think a really important thing is you have like let's say you have higher intelligence, right? Which I 100% agree with, right? We're not the
Hmm.
pinnacle. I think it just continues on and on and on because we know that God's there, right? And God is
Yeah. He's the
everything
pinnacle.
all at
That
once.
is it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so you know that there's a gradient leading up to it. You can understand this with just like any sort of field has a gradient, electric field, magnetic field. We can use physics to kind of help wrap our brain around this. Um, and there's also like the law of one. And so we are all connected together, not just you and me, but also all life. And this would include interdimensional life. And so I think one reason why there perhaps are more sightings of this is that because there's just more people engaging with that idea and
Yeah.
thought form and being open to it. And so it's because we are connected, it's also manifesting reciprocally into our
Yeah.
reality to
The
some
collective
degree.
consciousness. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people doing the work. There's a lot of people doing the work. A lot of people now are, being more mindful and really seeking to increase their consciousness, being open to new ideas. Like, like the consciousness evolution journey is not just sitting there in meditation, because every minute, every second can be a meditative experience. It doesn't have to be just sitting there doing some sort of meditative practice. So that's very valuable and a powerful practice to do.
Hmm.
But how can you apply mindfulness in every single second of your existence? It's a lot of consciousness evolution journey that can occur while you're sleeping with like dreams and engaging with lucid dreams and
Yeah.
precognition dreams and all this. And that's basically just showing that part of your brain is staying active enough to recognize itself in reality, even when you're in like what I think is the astral realm,
Hmm.
which is perhaps where these things one level up all exist. And then, of course, the entire spectrum. But yeah, I mean, I just, I think sometimes we get locked into these narratives
Hmm.
and fail to see some other perspectives out there. Like again, with the depictions that the Indians have, or there's other cultures too of these craft. Like, oh yeah, they just definitely came down and said hello to the entire civilization, and they helped save them from some problem or whatever. It's like, no, it might have just been like two monks that all of a sudden were in like samadhi and just like, whoa, what the heck are these things floating over there, right? And then
Hmm.
they like created a picture and brought that, counting back and stored that in the public record. And I mean, when I saw my UFO, I was driving back home. I was on the highway, but I had just had a little bit of cannabis and blue lotus flower.
Of course.
And so I was basically sober at that point. But it's not like I was completely sober, like didn't have anything. I did just have a little bit of, psychedelic blue lotus flower from, known in Egyptian culture
Mm.
and ancient legend, and of course cannabis is a mild but very well known psychedelic, and that opens up your floodgates, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I think that may be one reason why. There's also like a science laboratory just nearby, Lawrence Livermore Lab. So I don't know, maybe they're flying something. Other people have seen this thing too, but
Mm.
it's a bigger picture than I think what's being run with, like, you could say the mainstream or lies accounts. And a lot of these things are fake too. I think there also is a little bit of like a psyop in progress. What are your thoughts on that?
Mm. Yeah, man. There's so many different narratives that I feel like we can go down that are all getting mixed up into the alien narrative. So it's hard to say. Yeah, there might be a psyop. There might be actual aliens. Oh shit. Okay. I think the aliens are messing with my technology today, man. Hold on.
A few moments later.
So yeah, I actually just want to say this. We've been having a lot of well, I've been having a lot of technical difficulties. So if anyone notices a lot of cuts in the video, it's because I just have to figure it out. My assumption is that they're trying to mess with us. Interdimensional. They know how much reach you have, Stefan. They're like, we don't want the word to get out. These two guys, it's too conscious. There's too much energy coming in right now, and they're overloading the technology.
That
But
could
who
be
knows?
it. Honestly, that could be it though.
You really never know, man. I mean, if these things have, I mean, think about it. This might be a tangent, but if these things have the power and ability to traverse dimensions, then obviously they have the ability to affect our technology in some manner.
Yeah.
Just as I said, the 3D can affect the 2D in some kind of way through shadows and just through literally piercing it. We pierce the 3D pretty much pierces and morphs into the 2D. Why wouldn't the 5D and 4D be able to affect our technology? It actually is obvious. Not saying that's what's happening, just throwing it out there. This has never happened before. So of course it has to happen on a intensive alien conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Just one quick point is that some people believe that you have like a team, right? Like a spirit team,
Hmm.
guides, things of that nature. And I subscribe to that idea. I've had way too many instances to count where I'm working on something and I've been like, let's say, working too hard, or it's like it's time for me to shift or do something else.
Hmm.
And I've had like just out of nowhere, the computer hit like a critical error or flaw or just shut down. And then I'm like kind of being belligerent. I'm like, I'm going to finish this project. And I load it back up again. It fails again, really giving me the signal like, dude, you just need to stop.
Hmm.
Right. And then there's a clear, like a few hours later or a day later, there's a clear reason why. It's just like guidance that happens much less now because I'm more mindful of just in general what I'm doing and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I think that was all like guidance from my spirit team. And they just
Hmm.
like went in like, nope, we're just going to crash your computer. And, it only happened during moments like that. So that's why I
Yeah.
knew it was like, kind of a little bit of a synchronicity. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's 100% possible.
It's possible. I'm entertaining it at least. Just throwing it out there. It could be. And really, I mean, whether you want to think it's other beings, your spirit team, or not, it just comes down to letting go a little bit of your individualistic, human, egotistical will. You know, sometimes you just have to surrender to whatever's going on. That's another buzzword in the spiritual realm is surrender. But sometimes you literally just have to surrender to the goings on of your life. Like, what is the message that is trying to be conveyed in the moment here? And you might not get it in the moment, right? It might not come about when you're emotionally turbulent. But I think if you are still enough and you have the stilling practice of the mind, the meditative mind, you'll be able to see that and traverse that. And any future circumstances that yield that, you'll be able to traverse that and go with the flow of whatever fluctuations come about, you know? So, like you said, it doesn't happen to you anymore, most likely because you've learned. I think all of our things of our life are just guideposts to ultimately get us into that meditative mindset, which I think you said at the beginning of the conversation. I think that's really where it all leads us to be. It leads us to be led by these other forces that use inanimate objects, is seemingly. Sometimes I feel like they're playing a joke on me. My inanimate objects, I'm like, are these, they gotta be joking with me right now. They have to be. And it might be, I'm not saying it is, but it might be in some way your spirit guides, the interdimensional beings, just some other worldly force or unworldly force that is guiding you throughout all of these different situations in ways that you think are inanimate. They're actually very, very animate and full of life. I mean, everything is alive in some way.
Yeah.
That's we touched upon that already. It's all the one. It's all the one thing. It's all just energy. So it actually makes more sense that your cup has life, that your camera has life, that all of these things that don't have life are just an extension of your life, you know? And it all plays a part. It's all different puzzle pieces in your life. It's all just like different extremities, right? You have, once you go down this meditative path, you have more than just your two hands, your two arms, and your 10 fingers. Your extremities extend infinitely, essentially. And how it can affect you, your bodily vessel, is essentially infinite as well. So yeah, it's about entertaining those possibilities for your life and surrendering. I would say that is really what it's about. Surrendering to that greater force. Whether you want to call it aliens, God, spirit, higher self, Sadhguru, surrender to that greater force. And the thing is, I feel as though you'll find a little peace amongst the storm, you know? Kind of go with the flow a little bit better. And then that'll just lead the way through all endeavors. Like yeah, do you feel that now that you've been on this path for, I don't know, a few years now? The turmoil of your life and turbulence doesn't necessarily stop, but you just know how to navigate it a little bit better?
Yeah, because there's that practice aspect. And I think sometimes that is glossed over and
Mm-hmm.
that it's kind of like, well, the spiritual path is one that constantly, I mean, it does constantly require practice and like work to,
Yeah.
to maintain and to move forward. But as with any skill, as you practice it, you get better. And eventually, if you get good enough at it, it becomes unconscious. Like
Yeah.
watch like a master pianist, right? She's playing Rachmaninoff or something. She's not looking at sheet music. Like her eyes could be closed the entire time. Muscle memory is guiding her fingers, and then everything else, like her expression and all that stuff is just it's in a whole different realm of
Mm.
possibility beyond just like pulling up sheet music and like, okay, that's center C and doing this.
Yeah.
Like you can go from that to what this pianist is doing with Rachmaninoff. That's very possible. And that is the same thing with our spiritual life. I mean, I'm not meditating like sit down, eyes closed like this every single day, but I am applying a meditative mindset to a lot of things I do. I've been doing a lot of visualization at the gym recently before my
Mm-hmm.
lifts.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually I am meditating, I guess, almost every single day as a result of that. Um, and so that's been very powerful, but that bleeds into everything else.
Yeah.
And in general, this creates this momentum. And so, yeah, I don't experience so many of these like disruptions as before. I mean, perhaps it was also my computer, which is some level of conscious, right? Saying, bro, I need a rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could also be that too. There's multiple explanations. I think they're all probably true simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's what I think is happening with what is being reported around the United States and other places with like these UAP and drones. Is like I think there is an aspect of probably some weird government stuff happening. I think there's a little bit of a like uh, social media clout farming activity that's happening. I think it's a little bit of a psyop and wanting people to be fearful
Mm-hmm.
and to question like everything they're seeing in the sky. I think there's a little bit of that primordial man aspect that's being triggered, a little bit of our desire to want to kind of reach the next stage of like human intelligence and evolution,
Yep.
self-directed evolution. I think that was very
Yeah.
smart what you said.
Nice.
Um, and that is the consciousness process. It's like you're born, you start to grow up, and then you realize that there are certain questions that you can ask that
Mm-hmm.
lead you in certain directions, but there's not necessarily someone or force out there who will tell you that you can ask those questions.
Mm.
You have to discover that yourself.
Exactly. Ask and you shall receive.
Yeah, and so there's like I think and then there's actual like let's say actual aliens, right? Like I think all those things are at play at once. It's just so confusing and it's probably too much for people to hold at any given time because a lot of people have been programmed to be very dualistic in their views
Yeah.
and to just see one they can't hold two truths at the same time or even three, four, five, six, seven, right?
Exactly.
And that this will help with that process.
Mm.
Because the
Yeah.
people that are naturally curious and inquisitive and open, or even just a little bit of that, are going to like read through and find that comment saying, "Yo, that was just an airplane. That's why the sound was off, right? You didn't hear the
Yeah.
jets. Oh, here's the video from 7 years ago."
Mm-hmm.
Like I do think by having this condensation of confusion around this, it is also in many ways going to the rebound wave of that will be a little bit of a greater enlightenment that occurs, and that will probably start in 2025.
Mm. Yeah, very well said, man. Um, Ultimately, it all comes back to you, right? It's like we can entertain all the ideas we want about what's going on in the sky, but it really just comes down to your spiritual path and your meditative path. And then, yes, you'll be able to discern and you'll be able to find the comment that you need to find and find the truth, essentially. Find the truth on the inside and on the outside. As above, so below. Yeah.
An interesting question I have for you,
Mm-hmm.
because you've talked to, I mean, you have like what, over 300 interviews now or
200.
conversations?
We're getting
Yeah,
there, though.
yeah, with a lot of more awakened people. And so we touched on how if these beings or interdimensional beings, right, represent a higher stage of intellect and consciousness, and the law of one, we're all connected together. How have you noticed your own consciousness shift from connecting to so many different people,
Mm.
right? Maybe not actually like in the same room, but sometimes, but just in general, by having these conversations, you've just been imprinted by effectively hundreds of people now, all with a variety of life experiences and educations and skills, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And then using that experience that you've had personally, apply that to having that same level of or some degree of imprints like that, but from interdimensional beings. Do you see what I'm saying?
Uh,
Like if you receive these energy and consciousness imprints from interdimensional beings, what do you
oh,
speculate that process could look like based on your experience with what you've done?
okay. Well, first of all, I'll address speaking to awakened people. I think that's the most efficient way to expedite your awakening process. If you're truly open and curious and have enough humility to admit that maybe that person knows a little bit more than you, that will, like I said, expedite the process tenfold. I feel a lot more wise than I did before on episode one. So, yeah, it's been so helpful to my journey. But if you want to get into other beings and really higher beings, something higher than humans, what that'll look like, I've heard a lot of stories about that and people talking to Krishna and having these psychic conversations with these beings in other realms. And they do say they get downloads, kind of like light codes that are just implanted into their brain. So, I mean, if it works from a human to human basis, why wouldn't it work from a human to another being basis? For sure. I haven't had any experience that I know of, at least, doing that, but from other people that I spoke to that have regular conversations with these beings, they say it's very helpful, and they yeah, they give them like aid. They seem to give them guidance, and yeah, I guess it would, I don't know, I can't speak on it, so I can't give you that much because I don't, like I said, consciously have conversations with other beings yet, but I've spoken to other people that have spoken to other beings, and they say they're on our side. Like they're here to help us. They haven't any felt any nefariousness from that. So yeah, that's the thing too. I think how do I put this? In order to transfer or communicate with these beings, I think you have to be at a certain point of connectivity and love. I think you can't be nefarious and connect with these beings. Like you have to be on the resonance of love, and these other beings have to be on the resonance of love, or at least cooperation, maybe you could say. And then that's when you make the connection. I mean, just think about that from a human to human person. If I have some shield up or you have some shield up, then we're not going to be able to connect and we're not going to be able to transfer useful ideas to each other in the audience. So I think it's the same blueprint. It's the same architecture that you have with these other beings. If you really want to connect, you have to approach them with love and not fear. And that's the essence of Stephen Greer. Are you into Stephen Greer's work at all?
No, no.
So Stephen Greer, he does these CE5 events where he consciously sets out to communicate with these craft, and he brings people out into the desert and he says, we're going to connect with them. But the most important part of it is the intention of approaching them with no fear and welcoming them almost in and saying, hey, we're available. We're not fearful of you. Come on in. And he has, I've never done it, but from what I've seen, a lot of positive testimonials and actual video evidence of his process. And it's simple. It's just you go out there with intention and you say, come on in. I love you. And it might sound corny, but I think that's the truth. If you want to connect with not only other humans and expedite your spiritual progress, but connect with other beings that are way further than you in a spiritual sense, I think you have to approach it with radical love, radical acceptance of what they will offer you. If not, then you're putting up some kind of boundary. You're putting up an energetic boundary or shield that is essentially just a falsity. So yeah, moral of the story is you have to be unfearful of the seeming other being because it's not another being. It's actually just yourself. So you're just fearing a part of yourself that doesn't want to get in.
Mm.
That's a little deep, that's a little esoteric, but it's all about just not having any fear or having any kind of egotistical suit of armor up and just being open to what you will receive.
Yeah. I mean, it seems very similar to me about how Siddhartha became enlightened, became Buddha, and then people would like follow him around, and other people also reached enlightenment by being in the presence of Buddha and meditating together, looking at the lotus flower, all the different stories. And so there's this aspect of what is it that you want? It has to be like a genuine intention,
Yeah.
genuine, pure intention, and
Mhm.
then being in the environment that's conducive for that, perhaps receiving also that support and guidance from someone like, in this example, Buddha, and just having that imprint. And then that created another enlightened master, right?
Mhm.
So Buddha was not the one and only, Christ was not the one and only, according to legend, right? Like it created this ripple effect. And
Yeah.
so if humanity right now is like striving, especially in the United States, it seems. Americans are striving to manifest this more intelligent, more highly conscious force. And it does to some degree. And then people start receiving some of these imprints, and there are faster awakenings that occur, and people reach higher levels. Those people are still people. They're going to be still going to the grocery store and buying their avocados, whatever. And it's going to create this ripple effect, I would think. I find
Yeah,
that interesting. Like, I guess now we're disturbing the consciousness field more. So there's more and more ripples, and that can just
yeah,
reach out to deeper places,
yeah.
not only in the United States, but around the world.
I think that's what's happening too. And even if people aren't necessarily on the path, everyone's on the path in one way or the other,
Yeah.
one way or another, whether they realize it or not. So the people that are very ardent in their practice, like us and anybody listening, they are having this ripple effect and it's just spreading. That's why we're seeing all of this. We're seeing the aliens and AI, and we're having all of this technology come about so fast in such a novel manner. It's because we're affecting the morphogenetic field of the earth. I think it's just all energetic, and you know that. You know about energy and how it affects us. I
Yeah.
think we're just little by little affecting how this whole thing is playing out, how the whole stage of the earth is playing out. And it's all through just how your energy is affecting it. I like to say you save yourself to save the world. And I think it's that simple.
Mm.
Like if you are ardent enough in your practice, you will create a force field around yourself that just naturally reverberates out to the world and others in your community. And ultimately, yeah, the whole earth. It creates this butterfly effect. And we're seeing that happening right now. It's not a coincidence that a lot of people are on this awakening path, per se, the yogic path, the spiritual path. And we're having on the physical realm, the 3D realm, all of these innovations come about. We're seeing these actual 3D craft in the sky, and it's all happening at once, it seems like, right? Well, that's because people are waking up to themselves. They're going within. So, firstly, you go within, and then it affects the without. I think that's the very simple blueprint is like you affect your own inner sanctity, and then that affects the outer sanctity of the world. And it's this dualistic play, as above, so below. It's all one. But yeah, moral of the story is it's all happening right now in this very, very specific novel time because we're all just figuring out who we are on a personal level. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's if we look at the astrology quickly, we have Saturn and Neptune moving into the sign of Aries. This is a Western tropical astrology, and Aries is all about the self, individuality. It's the first sign of the zodiac.
Mm,
And so it's the initiation, it's the beginning. Neptune represents spirit and the consciousness. And
right
Saturn
there.
is this crystallization force for manifesting things into 3D.
Yeah.
So he's taking everything that Neptune has learned through his past 184-year cycle through the zodiac and is now catalyzing and crystallizing it into us, ourselves, and then we'll carry that forward. Of course, Neptune will keep moving, Saturn will keep moving. Eventually, they'll go through the different signs, but Neptune will be in Aries for 14 years. And so I think we're just starting to see the beginning of this with this whole like UAP story. And I think it's like, as you said, we're also encountering the different paths. One of them is like of duality still, and then the other is like going beyond duality, so non-duality, because there's there's definitely like I just recently signed up for X and Twitter so I could post some of my data graphics for my
Mm.
audience on there because people have been asking me like, "Hey, dude, how do I get that slide that you showed?" Okay, I signed up. It's a crazy place. I mean,
Yeah.
I only follow two people, so my algorithm is just completely based off of like what Twitter wants to show me. It's really
Yeah.
wild,
Yeah.
and so it's been showing me all this alien stuff recently, right? Because that's been a big wave. But there's definitely a lot of people who are fearful,
Hmm.
and I think it's also just making a lot of people fearful now of like what's happening above them because so many people are saying they're disguised as like commercial airliners. And then the videos that they're showing is of a commercial airliner with the sound turned off so you can't hear the jet engines. And now some of these people are going to be walking out their door, and of course, there's planes flying overhead all the time, especially in like a pretty developed area. they may be thinking like, what the heck are all these like, right? Some undoubtedly certain people are going to fall into that fear narrative. I think that's a little bit of the goal of certain forces out there is to create to keep that fear dynamic alive
Hmm.
because as you mentioned with Greer, like fear is the limiting factor and you have to release fear in order to open up to everything else. And
Yeah.
so if we it's like how there's certain forces that may like operate on fear and low energy like that. They're going to do whatever they can to maintain it because the overall trajectory is one of fearlessness.
Hmm.
Um, and that is the trajectory of walking the spiritual path. I mean, I know I've experienced that personally. It's not like I'm completely fearless, maybe, but like going from my normal job and then quitting everything and traveling around the world and taking a big risk there, like had no stable income coming in. I'm in like not backwater countries, but still you don't know the language. You're in the middle of like Serbia or something. You're like, what
Yeah.
the heck am I doing? You experience, you encounter that and then you, just like anything, get better and realize, oh, there's actually nothing to fear.
Hmm.
Uh, that's just my own personal journey with that, but I think my own personal journey in some ways is a microcosm of the collective human journey. Your own personal journey is also a microcosm of the macrocosm of human existence. And
Hmm.
we're engaging in this path away from fear, but forces that feed on that will, I would think, seek to maintain it and they'll use the most ridiculous things that they can if that
Yeah.
serves them.
Yeah.
Um,
It's the loosh.
You don't see any of these UAP videos during the day, right? It's only at night, just the lights, so you can confuse it for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to wonder, right? If we are being actually visited by these other dimensional beings, well, and it's only leading us upward, it's only leading us toward fearlessness. There has to be a counterbalance to that. Something that wants to keep us in the shadows, the dark forces that want to keep us in the shadows. So they demonize these things. They make them look scary. I mean, just think of the classical archetype of aliens. They're here to invade. Have you ever seen a friendly alien movie other than
Yeah.
E.T. maybe? E.T. is the only one I can think of at this point, but most of them they're coming down and they're destroying Earth. So that right there, yeah, that's like proof that they are. It seems to be some kind of agenda to want to demonize these things, and it might be happening in New Jersey. That literally might be happening in New Jersey. It's so many different. It's like a big soup of different narratives, and it's hard to really figure out what is the truth. I mean, on a realistic sense, I've had the idea that it's nothing to do with aliens. I do believe there are aliens or interdimensional beings out there, but the phenomena that's happening in New Jersey at this point is some kind of black ops government program that where they're testing out drone surveillance, and it's so in the dark that even people that are part of the government can't know about it. So this is like, and Stephen Greer actually gets into that. This really dark government program. I forget what he calls it, but it's this. It's pretty much it's the deep state, but it's really the deep state, not the deep state that the Republicans talk about. It's the true,
Yeah.
it's the true deep state that really is governing our world and that nobody even knows about. Like it's the government within the government, and they're the ones that are communicating with these interdimensional beings. But at this point, it seems like they're launching some kind of possibly a surveillance program in the most populated, densely populated state in the Union, which is New Jersey and New York. So I've had that idea that they're just trying to cover up some kind of drone technology, and they're running experiments at this point, and you can't be put on classical flight radar if you're running some kind of experiments like that. I mean, who knows? I don't know. That's the most non-alien, down to earth explanation I can give on why there's so much cover up. It's some kind of black ops program that they don't want anybody to know about, even the senators and the governors, the president. It's something
Hmm.
deep like that, and maybe that also has to do with aliens at this point. But I think it's just something where everybody's meant to be kept in the dark in some way. And ultimately that's fear. I don't think that's right, whether you want to include aliens in that matter or not. It's ultimately sowing the seeds of fear, which isn't good, you know? Yeah. I think we left off on that note actually before we had technical difficulties on really what's going
Hmm.
on in New Jersey. So maybe we can touch upon that. Like, what is going on in New Jersey right now? Like, what does your heart tell you? What is actually going on? Because there's lights in the sky, right? You can't deny that. Some things may be misinterpreted. Some videos might be 7 years old, like you said, but there seems to be something going on. So, what does your heart tell you is going on in New Jersey right now in a realistic sense?
I think we're seeing, and I definitely subscribe to the idea of a black ops program. I don't know if that's true or not, like if it's actually happening, right? But that very well is in the realm of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's a card that I think could be played at any moment. Because
Mm-hmm.
in my industry, I was connected to the UAV industry on unmanned aerial vehicles. Like for geophysical surveying, you connect a device to them. And I saw how drones got much, much better at flying and their flight times improved and maneuverability. And that's with like our kind of more mundane technology. Certainly there's technology that's more advanced that is not public. Um, so like I think some sort of black ops surveillance thing, totally possible. I think we're seeing a little bit of a return to how can we mold and control public perception. We saw this with the whole COVID deal, right? And how people were tuned to think a certain way. Not everyone did, but first it was like flatten the curve. All that stuff is bullshit,
Yeah.
right? It all came out to be bullshit. So, but people like subscribe to it. If you hear something enough times, a lot of people will believe it,
Yep.
even though it's not true. And what's interesting about that is if we go to the astrology really quick, because that's a tool I use. Um, we had a Jupiter Saturn conjunction in 2020 on winter solstice. And that is very much connected to law and order and society and just the larger themes that are at play between people and just governments and everything, politics, society, people, everything. It's one of the strongest like astrological cycles and energy imprints that affects this morphogenetic field that you mentioned. And that was the first shift into air, which is all about the mind. The air element's all about the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Great Mutation that occurred in 2020. And so for the next 150 years or so, these conjunctions between Saturn and Jupiter are only going to occur in air signs. We are now at the first square between that conjunction. So the planets have moved and now they're at the square aspect. And whenever you have a new aspect, it brings up the themes of the first one. And so we saw this big, quest, you could say, effort to mold human perception and thoughts and everything during the COVID ordeal. And now we're at this first square and we're seeing that, but this time from this like UAP angle.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a story that's like right now active and it's really just collecting a lot of data. A lot of this stuff has been AI generated too. Like the AI stuff is so good now. I've seen it take some time to make the really good ones, but it's possible. I've seen some that are like, that's pretty wild, like how good that is, how
Mm.
realistic it is. It's just undoubtedly a lot of this stuff is being AI generated. And I think people now with these tools and technology are saying, how far can we push this and see if people still believe us?
Yeah.
And it's just also just collecting data at the end of the day. Like I think this is in many ways just a data farming experiment.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a whole bunch of things happening at the same time, and the universe
Yeah,
just
exactly.
can just crystallize this experience for us,
Yeah.
such that we could go through all these different variations. Um, and this will be interesting to see how, in general, the public moves forward with that. I really hope it's of more of a fearless perspective, going forward, just that surrender aspect, but also having still integrity, right? Not willing to put up with, let's say, like a complete surveillance state. Like, by God, we don't want that. That's not
Mm.
going to be good for anybody. It's not going to be good for the evolution of humanity or consciousness. And so there's an aspect of surrender, and there's also an aspect of, like what do we have to do to actually make sure we achieve that conscious evolution,
Mm-hmm.
right? If that is the most important thing for humanity, our survival, and just our exploration of understanding of what what is. Do we want to be low vibe or do we want to be a high vibe?
That's it. It's that simple. Yeah, man. And the high vibe is toward fearlessness. It's interesting because there is this seeming dichotomy between people who are interested in this whole phenomena, whether you know what's going on or not that anybody knows what's going on. The people that are interested and they don't really fear it. I don't fear it, to be honest with you. And then you have the people that are sort of ignorant of themselves and what they're in and fear it. They just completely shut it out. Either act like it doesn't exist, it's fake, it's all lunacy, or they just simply are too busy, right? But I think it really comes down to fearlessness or fear. Like, do you fear the unknown or do you go head on into the unknown? I think that really is where the spiritual path leads, is you go right into your fear, or at least what you thought was fear, conventions of fear. And yeah, I don't know. It just makes life more interesting to live like that, you know? And how do I put this? The novelty and the craziness that's going on at this point, seeming craziness, it's not going to slow down anytime soon. So I don't see any other alternative to live, any other alternative mindset to live other than the spiritual path, because it's only going to get more and
Mm,
more dense. The transcendental object at the end of time, as Terence McKenna says, there's only going to be more and more novelty, novelty upon novelty. So you kind of have to go within yourself to be able to have some sanctuary of peace within, despite all the goings on of the outside world, because there's a lot of goings on of the outside world. And if you're not firmly seated within that sanctuary, that throne of peace inside, it's going to get to you and you're going to shoo away all the possibilities that we're talking about now. And you're going to essentially just miss out, right? You're going to miss out on life and miss out on what you are truly a part of. So I feel as though the most important point that we could bring up now is go within. No matter what happens, aliens, black ops programs, whatever's going on,
yeah.
whatever the heck is going to go on, it's not going to stop. So go within. Use that as sometimes I see all this happening and the alien stuff, and I'm seeing like, wars and just the craziness of the last few years. I just see that as like, okay, I use it almost like reverse psychology. I'm not gonna get sucked into that. Okay, this is a little too much today. I'm just gonna go and meditate. I'm gonna go for a walk. I'm gonna use this as guideposts to bring me back in, you know? And I think that's what's happening is the darkness is leading to the light, right? The chaos is leading to the peace in a very simple and esoteric way. The um the conflict is leading us to harmony. And I think that's the blueprint right now. It's interesting. It's interesting to say the least on how that works. But I think it's because we have to realize the futility in trying to, how do I put this? The futility in trying to like explain all of that stuff with the mind from the 3D point of view. You have to, the opportunity is there. You don't have to actually, but I would recommend you go within, and that will do all the explanation you need. Like within your higher intelligence, your intuition will give you all the explanation that you need, and it goes beyond words. It's not like this. It's not like your mind will be able to compute it in some kind of logical, rational way. It'll just allow you to at least sit with it as we're sitting with it in this conversation. That's at least what I use it in a very relatable and usable manner. All of the craziness, all of the narratives that we're talking about now, I just use it as like another tool in my toolbox, or at least an indicator for me to go within, you know? And then that just lets me deal with it better, right? Do you feel
Yeah.
as though it's like you don't have any fear toward the aliens or any black ops programs? Like we're kind of open with it. We're just like, hey, if that's how it is, that's how it is.
Well, I've had a lot of dreams as a kid about aliens, and sometimes I have alien dreams that have like a fear angle to them. And so I don't know why I've had those since I was a young kid, but I guess that's something for me to work through. I guess it's just this fear of a greater force that has complete control over you. And so that, though, in general, is something to just work at.
No, that's
Um,
God.
yeah, I
That's the
mean,
thing.
yeah, exactly.
Even if there are the Anunnaki that created us and have these greater forces to somehow control us in some kind of ethereal way. They control our inanimate objects, as we spoke of before. They still abide to the same laws that we abide to in the universe of God, of love. So I think in one way, if you go within yourself and you realize that, it'll mitigate that fear because you say, oh, well, they're still under God. I mean, I think this all comes to God realization. You have to realize what God is within yourself. And then that transcends any kind of fear, even if it's from fifth dimensional, sixth dimensional beings, demons, the seraphim, the Anunnaki. It'll transcend all that because you see that's all within the soup. It's all within the soup in the mix of God. You know, that's how at least I justify it in myself because it's like there's no higher power than God. It doesn't matter if there are other demigods. There's no higher power than the one. You know what I'm getting at, though?
Yeah, and that's why I think having complete faith in that is the key because
Amen.
like there can be these things happening around you which could affect you, right? Hypothetically.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know that you're on the path that you're meant to walk and you trust in the process and God, then everything will play out as it's meant to and you'll be protected and those things may not actually even decide to interact with you because it was never destined to be. Um,
Yeah.
I definitely believe that. And I like what you talked about earlier about going thin and getting the answer and not having to like think about it. Because this is a very limited instrument. It's very powerful, but ultimately very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had plenty of experiences personally where I've just had knowings and they're instant. It's
Yeah,
an instant
exactly.
knowing that
Mm-hmm.
contains all the information needed. And then you could, if you wanted to, like lay out all the language to explain it, and it still wouldn't capture that knowing, but you could try. But it's like an instant thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really powerful. And that is the key.
That's the key, man. Truly. Intuition, the higher self, the Holy Spirit, truly, that leads the way through all endeavors, no matter what happens. And that is fearlessness. True faith in that leads to fearlessness. Sometimes you have to go within the fear, you have to go through the fear to come out the other side to the fearlessness. But it's always worth it. And you'll just know, yeah, there's this like inkling of knowing whether you're on the right path or doing the right thing or saying the right thing. And it goes beyond words, you know, it goes beyond any computation that the mind could present. It's just like this, it's just like lights up. I don't know. For me, it's like magnetism. Like just something, yes or no. It works the other way too. It's like yes or a no. And I just know it's this like feeling within. So yeah, many different labels for it, but just follow that and really nothing can hurt you. You know, it's transcendence in that way. That's the path of all of the sages. How many sages have gotten martyred, right? But
Yeah,
they stuck
yeah.
by their word. Socrates comes up, Jesus comes up, but they stuck by this wavelength in their word because they know that even if you harm the body, it doesn't matter. I'm aligned with God. And yeah,
It's easier to let go.
it's
It's
easier to let go.
fundamentally easier. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't require as much effort.
Mm,
It's a different sort of effort. Um, but it's a skill that can be learned and it just starts with small things,
exactly.
then progresses upwards. And yeah, I mean, I've been definitely practicing that skill myself and embracing that more and more, and that's very powerful. So I hope that this whole thing that's occurring, that's in the public zeitgeist right now, and just like swirling around this vortex, I hope
I
that creates that process for people.
think it is.
Um, and so I'm glad we had this ability to talk about this because you can get lost in like the not the details, but you can get wrapped around these little misdirections and stuff and
Yeah.
steered away from like, for example, there's like a really big bright light, but then there's like these flashing lights over here, right? And you're like, oh, look at the flashing lights. It's like, no, look at the big bright light in front of you. That's God or the actual thing, right?
Yeah, the
A lot of people are
source.
looking at these flashing lights. And
Yeah, good point.
I was like, no, let's look right at the big bright light and see what's happening.
Yes, I like that. The bright light will lead the way. The one bright light that is within. That'll lead the way. No matter who
Yeah.
you are, no matter where you are, that one bright light will lead the way. I like that, man. Yeah. So we had some fun today, entertaining ideas of aliens and spirits and demigods and interdimensional beings. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's all just entertainment, really is. And I think this whole thing that's going on, this soup of multiple narratives of who the heck knows what's happening, is ultimately going to lead us to that one bright light. You know, I think that's the blueprint. The conflict, if you want to call it conflict, is leading us to harmony in one way or the other. So, yeah, I thank you for coming on here, man. I think this was awesome talk, despite the technical difficulties. I'll put it together and mix it up, and we'll be all good. But yeah, I think this was awesome, and I wish you all the best, man. And yeah, that's it. Maybe we can tap in again. Like I said before, I don't think this is going to slow down anytime soon. So maybe we can tap in periodically as there's new developments in the zeitgeist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm down. We also still need to have our mushroom talk. We
Mm,
talked about it a little bit, but I think that'd be fun.
yeah,
So we'll figure that out too. Yeah, we can perhaps also, hit that wavelength and have the conversation too. So that could be
for
fun.
sure. For sure, man.
So
Well, I thank you for coming on here, sharing your time, effort, and wisdom, Stefan. And that's it, man. I wish you all the best. Peace and love to you.
cool. Thank you.
And peace and love, everybody. Goodbye.